Welcome everybody. Thank you very much for gracing us with your presence. Those who are here physically, those who are here virtually, but especially those who are here physically. Today's class is dedicated by Rivka Sachs and her family in loving memory and Leilu Nishmas of her dear unforgettable husband and my dear friend, Reb Tzvi Yehuda, Reb Yitzchak Elchanan Sachs, on the occasion of his 19th yahrzeit on the 14th day of Mar Cheshvan. Tehei Nishmasei Tzruda B'Tzer HaChaim, and may his soul, his beautiful soul, remain an eternal source of light and love and inspiration for you and the entire family and all of us and the Jewish people. And thank you very much. And we should all see V'sachazeh neinenu hekitzu v'rananu sheichne yafar v'hu b'toichem. Amen. Thank you. Just to begin on a lighter note, I can't ignore the fact that today is the election day. And as I went earlier to get a coffee by the coffee machine, so there was a very heated conversation. I said, it looks like the fate of the elections is being decided right here at the coffee machine. And so somebody said, no, it was already decided earlier in the mikveh. But I know it's a man's joke, sorry. You could scratch it from the record. But so this rabbi, he's been a rabbi for many, many years, and he has a very big congregation in South Africa. So he wrote to me on Sunday that at his sermon Friday night, he stood up to the congregation. I think it's 1,000 or 2,000 people who come daven in his shul in Johannesburg. And he said, I said to them, in principle, a rabbi should not get involved in politics. And a rabbi should not be discussing elections. And therefore, all I could say to my congregation is, let the best man win. That's number one. Number two, somebody sent me a video a few hours ago that I felt was extremely inspiring. And in a world that often seems that it's gone insane, it's nice to see pockets of truth and sanity and authenticity, and even more than that. And it also shows that, we don't always see the full picture. The president of Argentina is a non-Jew. His name is President Milei, and he swore in yesterday or Sunday this week his new foreign minister for the country of Argentina. And there's always an oath, and you take an oath, and I see that there's two books by the oath. Usually there's one book. There's two books. And he does the oath, and when he finishes the oath that he's going to be loyal to God and to his people and to his country, to protect the people and protect the country and its constitution, the president speaks to everybody gathered there, family, friends, other politicians, leaders of the government. And he says, I decided not to go according to protocol today and do the oath on the Torah. On the Torah. I wanted to do the oath on the Torah. And then he said, I want to say something else. You're being sworn in the Parsha of Lech Lecha. What is the theme of the Parsha of Lech Lecha? He says that God told the first Jew, Abraham, to go on a journey. And on this journey, all the nations of the world are going to be blessed. So he should become a beacon of light and inspiration to all the nations of the world. And that's your job. So the fact that you're being sworn in the portion of Lech Lecha gives you a special blessing to follow the footsteps of Abraham and light up the world with God's law and God's love and make the world a better place, a place of freedom and a place of love. And he said, now I want to tell you should have a lot of success and blessings. That's what the Rebbe would have told you. And that was the way the foreign minister of Argentina was sworn in this week. So Avraham Avinu did have an impact, is having an impact. And it's exactly what shall become of the entire world as everybody embraces the blessing of Avraham, and may we see it very speedily in our days. Amen. One of the extraordinary and also difficult and enigmatic stories in the beginning of Parshas Lech Lecha is Avram's journey down to Egypt with his wife Sarai. And the context, everybody probably knows. Basically, Hashem tells Avram to depart, Lech Lecha, to depart from his country, from his birthplace, from his father's home, and go on a journey to the land that he will show him, El Oretz Asherek. And Avraham and Sarah, who are already not youngsters, Avraham is 75 years old, begin this trek, this voyage, together with his nephew, Lot, his brother's son. And they come to this new land, which is the land of Canaan, and Avraham Avinu settles in that land. But very soon, just a few verses later, we learn about another episode which forces him and his wife to leave the land. And they go down to the south, to Egypt. So that's the story we're going to explore today. And we have it here inside in your source sheet. You have it in the original Hebrew and also the English translation. For those who have an easier time in the English, I'll read it in the Hebrew. Vayhi Lech Lecha Yud Beis Yud. That's Genesis chapter 12, verse 10. Perik Yud Beis Pasuk Yud. Vayhi Rav Ba'aretz. There was a famine in the land of Canaan. Vayered Avraham Mitzrayma Lagur Sham. Avraham goes down to Egypt in order to sojourn there, to live there. Ki Chaved Harav Ba'aretz. Because the hunger is very, very severe. It's heavy, it's intense. There's really nothing to eat. So it's not a viable situation to remain there. The next verse, Vayhi kasher hikriv lavei Mitzrayma. As he approaches Egypt, he's not there yet, but hikriv means he comes close. Lavei, he's about to come there. Vayomer el Sarai ishtai. Avram speaks to Sarai, his wife, and he says these words: Hinei no yadati ki isha yefas maraat. Look, I know now that you are a woman of beautiful complexion. Hinei no yadaiti. Now I know that you are a person of extraordinary beauty. V'haya kiyiru oisach hamitzrim. As the Egyptians will see you, v'amru, they're going to say, Ishtoi zois. This is his wife. Obviously, they look like a husband and a wife. V'hargu oisi. They will kill me. V'oisach yichayu, allowing you to live. They're going to want to eliminate me so that you can be not you. So I'm not a burden. I'm not a burden because if I'm your husband and you're my wife, then it's inappropriate to destroy a marriage. But if I'm dead, of course, it's no problem. You're available. Imri na chaysiyat. Please say that you're my sister. L'man yitav li ba'avurech. So that it may go well with me because of you. I will survive. V'chaysa nafshi beglalech. And because of you, my life will be spared. My soul will be spared. They won't have to kill a brother in order to be able to have you. And indeed, that's what happens. They come down to Egypt. Sarah acquiesces. They both maintain that she is his sister, not his wife. And of course, she's taken to Parai. The people who see her say, this is an amazing queen for Parai. She's taken to Parai. And we know the end of the story. Parai and his family are plagued with a profound illness. Parai sees something that's very strange. He calls Avram and says, why did you lie to me? Obviously, this was something inappropriate. She's a married woman. And he sends Avram and Sarai off, but with a lot of gifts, so that he comes back from Egypt a very wealthy and affluent human being. This is the story. Now, this is the first story about Avraham and Sarah. This is the first story about the first Jewish husband and the first Jewish wife. There'll be quite a few stories afterwards. But this is the opening story. After their journey to Canaan, settling there, Avraham building an altar, they're getting a promise from Hashem that this land will be his children's. The first episode of the first Jewish husband and wife, the first patriarch and matriarch of our people, the founding father and mother of our nation, of our eternal nation, is really this story. Why does the Torah tell us this story? We don't know all the stories about Avraham and Sarah. We only know a few stories. Avraham lived to be 175 years old. Sarah lived to be 127. They lived long lives. A lot of things must have happened during those years. The Torah only chooses a few stories because Torah is not just a history work. As the Maharal writes, the word Torah comes from the word lesson. Like moreh is a teacher. Torah means a lesson. In other words, it's not just a book of history or a book of law. The genre of Torah is not so clear. On one hand, there's a lot of history there. On one hand, there's a lot of laws there. There's a lot of stories there. So really the genre of Torah it's a blueprint. It's a lesson. It's a guide. That's really its genre, because people always struggle, when you're reading a book, what is it? Is it a history book? Is it a book of law? Is it a book of ethics? Is it a novel? Is it fiction? Is it not fiction? You always have to know what's the genre of the book before you pick it up so you don't get disappointed. If you want to have a nice Shabbos afternoon read and you picked up a book on chemistry, it may contribute to the Shabbos nap. It may not contribute to the engagement unless you're in love with chemistry, like some of us. No, okay. Truth is, chemistry is also a story. You just have to know how to read it as a story. But that's a separate subject. So when you open up a book of Torah, you have to know what is its genre. And it's confusing. There's a lot of laws, there's a lot of history, there's a lot of stories, there's a lot of ethics. The answer is, it's a guide. It's a roadmap. When you get into the car, you're going on a long journey, you have Waze. Why do you have Waze or Google Maps or whatever you use? Because it can be confusing. You have to know when to take a right, when to take a left, when to go straight, when you got lost, when you make a U-turn. This is even a physical journey in a physical vehicle from one location to another location. Even if you want to get through Monsey to avoid traffic, it's good to have a satellite guiding you. Certainly the voyage of life, navigating a very, very complex and intricate journey of life through the ups and downs, the upheavals and the vicissitudes of each and every individual life. So there's a guide, there's a blueprint, a divine blueprint. That's the genre of Torah. So there's stories, there's mitzvahs, there's commandments, there's episodes, there's anecdotes. But it's all part of a blueprint, a guide. So most of the stories that happen with Avraham and Sarah, Yitzchak, we don't know. The Torah selects a few. This is the first one it selects to teach us. This means that this is essential to our story. At first glance, we don't see a big lesson in the story. I mean, they went down to Egypt because there was hunger. Avraham was very afraid that he'll be killed. I guess he understood the culture he's going into. It's not a problem to kill a husband and then say, oh, the woman is free. And he asks Sarah for a big favor, and Sarah acquiesces, and then she's taken. And at the end, it works out for her, and it works out for him. What is the lesson behind the story? What is the meaning behind the story? There's one interesting detail in this story that already Rashi and the commentators discuss, and that is Avram's strange words to Sarah when they come to Egypt, and he says, "Hine no yadati ki isha yafas marat." Now I know that you're a beautiful woman. What's this now? Hine no yadati ki isha. It's like now, like hine. Now I know ki isha yafas marat. Avraham Avinu, you're already an older guy. I mean, you never knew that Sarah was beautiful? Rashi asks this question. What does this mean? How are we supposed to understand this? It's so difficult. Rashi gives 3 different interpretations to be able to deal with this statement. The first explanation Rashi gives, and it's from a Gemara in Maseches Baba Basra, is that Avraham Avinu and Sarah were so modest, he didn't really gaze at the beauty. And the Marsha says, but how can that be? There's a halacha that you're not allowed to marry a woman before you see her. The Marsha asks a question. How can this be? What does this mean? So obviously Avraham Avinu saw Sarah before. So if he saw Sarah before, what does it mean? Now you found out? So Rashi gives different interpretations afterwards. One is, even after all the traveling and the headaches and the journey and the exhaustion and everything, even now I still see that the beauty has been maintained, which means it's beauty of a different magnitude. And he gives a third interpretation. Now I have to worry about it. Before I didn't have to worry about it. Now I have to worry about it. So these are all different interpretations Rashi gives, because it's difficult to understand what Avram means when he tells Sarah, now I see ki isha yafas mara, as though it was a discovery, and as your Baba would say, tadekt America. He discovered America together with Columbus. There's an incredible interpretation on this that was given by the Baal Shem Tov. And that's going to be the focus of the class today. And this teaching of the Baal Shem Tov was given over by one of his students. The student is known as the Maor Einayim. And that's going to be the next source. You'll see Maor Einayim Parshas Shmos. The Baal Shem Tov was the founder, of course, of Chassidus, of the Chassidic movement. He was born in 1698. Tov Nun Ches, Nachas, and he passed away 1698, and he passed away 1760 on Shavuos. Rabbi Yisrael Baal Shem Tov. One of his greatest students was a man named Rabbi Nachum Tversky, and he's known as Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl. Chernobyl is a city in Ukraine, and Rabbi Nachum Tversky settled in Ukraine, in Chernobyl, and over there he was a very well-known teacher and master and Rebbe, and one of the great tzaddikim in Ukraine of that generation, a student of the Baal Shem Tov, and then later a student of the Baal Shem Tov's successor, the Maggid of Mezrich. Rabbi Nachum Chornobyl was born in the year 1730, Hey Allah from Taf Tzaddik in the Hebrew calendar, and he passed away, actually his yahrzeit is coming up in a few days, Yod Aleph Cheshvan, Tov Kuf Nun Ches. The 11th of Cheshvan, Tov Kuf Nun Ches, would be 1797. And from him, many Hasidic dynasties came out, including Tolna, Skver, Racham Strifke, and quite a few others, Chernobyl, and quite a few others, especially through his son, known as the Chernobyl Maggid, Rabbi Motteler, Mordechai of Chernobyl. He wrote a book called Maor Einayim. Maor Einayim, which is a commentary on the Chumash, on the Parsha, and also a second section known as Yisamach Le, which is a commentary on different pieces of Gemara. Just an interesting thing, the book originally was 15 times thicker. It's not such a small book. I mean, it's not a big book, but it's a pretty nice sized book, but it was 15 times bigger. 15 times, 1-5. What happened to it? He was showing the manuscript, and most of it he didn't allow to print. So he said, why? So he said something fascinating. He said, any of the teachings that I remember saying, I don't want published. The only ones I want published are the ones that I don't remember saying. It's the only thing that he wants published. That's why the book is much thinner than it was originally. In other words, the idea is that if he remembers saying it, so it was coming from a place of consciousness that he felt could be more of a blockage. If he doesn't remember saying it, so it was like there was no ego there, he was just a channel. So that's about this sefer. Another interesting thing about him is he was very involved in Pidyon Shvuyim. He used to raise money to release Jews from captivity. This, you're talking about Poland, Ukraine, in that generation, which is the 18th century, the 1700s. He was once arrested. Somebody informed on him, and he was put into prison. When he was in prison, he experienced a deep sense of anguish. Not only that he was in prison, but it's almost like I dedicated my life to help countless people get out of prison. So this is how I'm being rewarded, being thrown into prison. It just felt like so unjust, so unfair. And he was just sitting in his cell and he was pondering about this. At that moment, a woman who was cleaning, she was part of the maintenance of the prison, came in to sweep up. And she starts sweeping. She was veiled mostly, so you couldn't see her face, but she was there sweeping. And, he didn't say anything. He was in his cell and she was doing her thing. But she starts talking to him. And she said, I want to ask you a question. He didn't expect that. What type of question does she want to ask? Like the president of Argentina. I didn't realize why I said it, now I realized. I want to ask you a question on Parshas Lech Lecha. He's like, okay, he didn't expect this in this cell. And she says, the first words of Lech Lecha is Hashem told Avraham, Lech Lecha, go to you. What does it mean, go to you? You don't go to you. So Rashi says, La na'ascha l'toivascha. This journey is for your sake. It's a journey. It's hard to relocate. It's hard to uproot your life and transport and start over again. But it's for your benefit. La na'ascha l'toivascha. So she says to him, what's the great benefit? Where is the great benefit? So he said, Rashi says, I'll make your name great, and you'll have all these blessings. She said, you think Avraham Avinu cared if his name is great? Where's the benefit for him? So she says, I'll tell you. I'll tell you the meaning of this. Avraham Avinu dedicated his life to Achnasas Archim. He was the pillar of kindness and generosity and love. His heart was open, his home was open, his door was open, his soul was open. This was Avraham Avinu. He was a legend for this in his lifetime. But can you really know how to treat a guest if you were never a guest? Do you know the vulnerability of a guest? If you were never a guest, if you're the host, it's great. You're nice, you're kind. So Hashem said, Lech Lecha. I want you to know what it feels like to be a refugee. What it feels like to come into a new city. As you used to say, Agriner, you're not a native, you're not from here. And experience it. Then when you'll have guests, it's going to be different. You'll have the gift of empathy. You won't just be nice and kind, you'll really be able to be empathetic, you'll be able to experience them. That's what he meant, Lech Lecha, this is for your benefit. Anyway, she finishes sweeping and she leaves. Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl is like, what just happened? Where did this come from? And then he realized that this was an answer to his thoughts. He felt it's so unjust. He's dedicated his life to release people from captivity, and now he ended up in prison. This is exactly what she told him about Avraham Avinu. He won't just release them as a kindness, but as somebody, detached or aloof, but rather he empathizes with them. So it just enlivened his spirit. And what type of coincidence that this cleaning lady in this prison has this deep Torah on Parshas Lech Lecha, and she chooses to tell it to him. So when he came to the Baal Shem Tov, he shared the story. So the Baal Shem Tov said, tell me, Rabbi Nachum, how does it feel and how does it sound to hear Torah from Sarah Imenu? What does it feel like to hear a Torah from Sarah Imenu, from Sarah, our mother? So this was Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl. So in this piece, Maor Einayim, it's actually in Parsha Shmos, he quotes a teaching from the Baal Shem Tov that redefines or recasts the story in a very profound emotional and spiritual and psychological light, which gives us perspective, first of all, the deeper meaning of the story, and equally important, how this story becomes a guide for life and why it's the first story about the first Jewish couple. Meaning it's almost essential to understand marriage or any relationship, a real relationship, only through this story. But why? So let's see what the Maor Einayim says. Okay, Maor Einayim, it's a very, very long piece. I chose a few paragraphs because the piece itself is quite a few pages. So I'm going to read, I'm going to translate and explain. If anybody has questions, as always, feel free to ask. Maor Einayim Parshas. Again, I plucked out some paragraphs from a very, very long essay or shtickle over there in Maor Einayim. By the way, the name Maor Einayim is a pasuk in Tehillim, which means Maor Einayim is Samach Lev. Maor Einayim is the light of the eyes, right? Maor Einayim. In Noida, it's known Sha'amachshava shebechol adam ha'Yisraeli nilkecha me'olam ha'machshava. The thought in every Jewish soul comes from the world of divine thought. In other words, every thought that comes into my brain is part of a flow of energy, cosmic energy, which is from the divine intelligence. The divine intelligence, like it says, Kulam b'chachma sisa. Everything is divine intelligence. So every thought ultimately is taken. Really? If so, why do I have crazy thoughts sometimes? What can happen though is some thoughts are broken, which means the thoughts have fallen from their source. They're not coherently in the flow, but they were fragmented. They're broken from their source. We're going to explain what this means. Somebody who has a heart that wants to understand this and know this, will take the thoughts and bring them back to their source. And will refine them from the place of brokenness, and trace them back to the divine thought, which is called Chachma, Hashem's wisdom, intelligence. The Zohar says, the Zohar is the foundational work of Kabbalah. It means the book of light. Zohar is light. Everything gets refined, gets elevated. Biriru is like from the word boirer, select, sublimated through Chachma, through the divine intelligence. Shayidei zeh hachachma, shemaylin lemachshava elyoina, al yidei zeh mevaredan mebchinas shvira v'nasemen toiv gomer. Through the Chachma, he elevates, or she elevates the thought to the divine thought. So now it's not broken anymore. It's uplifted from brokenness. It's brought back to wholeness, and it becomes pure goodness. Kize ikar avodaseinu. This is our main work. Very interesting words. This is our main work. Levarer hanitzutzes shehema machshavos mulubashin beklipos. To elevate the sparks, which are thoughts. Every thought is a spark. Think of a thought as a real entity. It's a spark, but it's dressed up in klipos. Klipos means husks, shells, containers. Like a klipa is like the banana peel is called a klipat banana, or so a klipa is like a shell. To refine them, to elevate them, and to unify them with their source. All these thoughts, sparks, which are covered in shells and husks, to extricate them. This is the meaning of the verse in Tehillim. We say it in the morning in davening. And this, I underlined it because this pasuk is going to be the key. What does it literally mean? Rabbos machshavas belev ish means there's many thoughts in the heart of a person. Right? How many schemes and thoughts and ideas and mental chatter do we have? Vatzas Hashem, Hisakim. But the counsel, the advice of Hashem, that will endure. In Yiddish there's an expression, a mensch, you remember the mensch tracht und Gott lacht. I don't know what a humorous expression it is, but literally it means man thinks, I don't know, there's no it doesn't work in English, right? Person plans and God has his own thoughts, It's nice, people have a to-do list, right? To-do list. I always say, could you synchronize it with God's to-do list? It's not always the same, I have a to-do list, 45 things that I'm going to do within the next 25 minutes. You know how we have our to-do list, right? If you get through one item, you're pretty good. 3 months later, we still have a couple of items. So Rabbis Machshavas Belevish, people plan, they have all these types of different thoughts. Vatzas Hashem Hisakim, there was God's plan, Hisakim. That's literally what it means. But Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl here is going to give a whole deeper interpretation. Hakavana, what this really means is yeshiva mine machshavas ba'adam v'lo yoser. Every person only has 7 thoughts, no more. You'll say, you don't know who he's talking to. You mean in 1 second, 7 thoughts, or actually in a millisecond? 5 seconds? I mean, really? 7 thoughts? Like, who are you talking to? You know levels of anxiety these days? 7 thoughts? Halavai, 7 thoughts. He's going to explain what he means. He knew about anxiety. Yeshiva mine machshavas ba'adam v'lo yoser. There are 7 thoughts in a person. There are not more than that. Even this is already comforting. Wow, I'm only dealing with 7. I'm not dealing with 7 billion. I'm not dealing with 7 trillion. I'm not even dealing with 7,000. I'm dealing with 7 thoughts. V'chol achas mehen koilelas mine machshavos ba'adam v'lo yoser. Each one of these 7 includes all the types of thoughts in a person, and there are no more. Here's the catch. Each one of them could contain thoughts ad infinitum. But it's only 7. In other words, sub-thoughts, yeah. Like branches from a tree. It's one tree. The tree can have, not one branch, the tree can have many, many branches. But it's one tree. So it's really one thought. The thought can branch off into more thoughts, and those thoughts can branch off into more thoughts. And if you have an active Jewish mind, it creates branches like this. A tree, at least it takes a couple of years. It creates branches and more branches and more branches and more branches and more branches, and at this point the tree may have already hundreds of thousands of branches, but he says it's really one thought. And there are 7 such trees. There are 7 such types of thoughts that linger and vibrate through my brain throughout my life. So rabbis machshavos belevish, but those rabbis are essentially 7. So lemashal, he gives an example. Yesh kama mine machshavos shehem mebchinas ha'ava. One category of thoughts all connect to the place of love. They're all about love. Love, connection, relationship, attachment. However, what types of thoughts? V'yesh ben avas rois. There's thoughts about love that may actually be counterproductive. It's all about love and attachment, but it's toxic, it's not good. Meaning it's not going to help the person. They also come from the source, but they fell from the source. Fell means they're not in the flow anymore. So they fell from their real source. It's like if you throw down a crystal bowl from the roof and it falls to the ground, it breaks into pieces. Now when you look at a fragment, you don't see its original glory. Gluing back the pieces together, recreating the vessel, is a whole different job. I don't know if you know, in Japan, there's a very interesting form of work. It's called, I spoke about a job, it's called, I think, katengu. Like when a bowl breaks, so basically they take the crack and they put a special, like gold or silver on the crack, and from the crack, they rebuild it, and that becomes its beauty. So the crack itself becomes part of its beauty. So essentially he says, you have thoughts from the world of love. They come from there, but they may have fallen. What does it mean fallen? They're not in a coherent flow. It's not in the zone of the source. So therefore it's love, it's connection. But it's seemingly disconnected. Shehurak avas habayri yisbarach tanu kala tanugim. The source of all love is the love of Hashem, who is tanug kala tanugim, the bliss behind all bliss. The bliss behind all bliss, and therefore the love behind all love is the source of all love, Hashem. Now when a person is aware of this and suddenly they experience this fallen love, it's a feeling of love and attachment, but it's a wounded feeling. It's a wounded love. It's a broken love, but it's about love. Miyad yecherad. The person should become aware, intensely aware. V'yomer should say, 1 second, where did this thought come from? In its origin, it came from the divine experience of love. That's where it came from. And because this feeling, this thought triggered love, it can bring the person back to the real origin of love, which is what they really are looking for. And it's much easier because they were just triggered by this need for love. And then this fallen thought is resurrected. It has a tkuma. Tkuma means it rises back to its original stature. From being broken, fragmented, and fallen, it's restored back to its original glory. And this is true about all 7 types of thoughts. One category is everything connected to attachment, relationships, love, closeness. That's one category. Then you have another category, everything connected to fear, dread, reservation, angst. I'm afraid, I'm terrified, I'm overwhelmed, I want to get out. This is the whole other category of thoughts. Now these types of thoughts can be in the millions, can be in the billions, can be, he said, adein mispar, adein finaitim, but it all belongs to that genre. Then he says, hispirus. Hispirus is from the word tiferes, which means glorification. It could look like the person is looking for beauty. They're looking for beauty. They're looking for their own beauty. They're looking for the beauty outside. Sometimes hispirus could even mean boasting. They're looking to share and talk about their beauty. Then there's vinitzuach. Another category of thoughts is nitzuach. Nitzuach is victory. It's all about ambition. What I want to do, what I need to do, what I want to accomplish, what I need to overcome. How am I going to overcome it? How I get my schedule done, what I want to achieve, etc. A whole other category of thoughts. Vashar mishiva mine yemei habinyan. And then you have the other ones. So we had already love is one form. Fear is another form. That was yira. Tiferes is everything connected to beauty. Nitzuach, netzach, is connected to victory, ambition. And then you have the last 3. Haid, Yisaid, Malchus, we'll soon see. Bekulam hakavana. With all of thoughts, the objective is always sheyalam l'sharsham. Bring them back to their source. They have a source. They were not born in a vacuum. They weren't hatched in no man's or woman's land. They come from somewhere. They may have been broken. Bring them back. Somebody who doesn't have a heart to want to understand this, Azay nimshech achar hamachshava chas v'shalom. Then the person is just drawn and lured into the thought, to the outer shell of it, which may bring them to an action associated with the outer shell, and then I actually take the original thought and I cast it further and further and further from its source, because I don't understand what it's asking for. There was an atzas Hashem in all the machshavos. Rabbis machshavos believers, we have so many thoughts, but what's atzas Hashem? What was God's idea in all the thoughts? He suck them, to bring it back, to raise it to its original stature. But for that, the person has to understand what's behind every thought, where it's coming from. If not, I just get lured into the outer casing of it, to the shell of it, instead of seeing the spark in the shell. All I eat is the banana peel instead of finding the banana, the orange peel instead of getting to the orange, the pomegranate peel instead of getting to the seeds. I eat the yellow in the pomegranate. What is that called, those yellow stuff in the pomegranate? Anybody eats that? The pulp? The pith. Thank you. So I get lured into the shell, the husk, instead of extracting it. Because Atzas Hashem was He Sakum. It was always one. He Sakum, it should come back. V'zehu meirachai Hashem nirali. The fourth paragraph. Yirmiyahu Hanavi says, Yirmiyah chapter 31. Meirachai Hashem nirali. Literally it means, from a distance, Hashem has shown up for me. What does it mean from a distance? Meirachai Hashem nirali. So he says amazing. Something amazing. Adirabba Hashem nirali al yedeza. Sometimes you look at things and they seem so distant from God, so remote, maybe even vulgar, maybe unclean, or at least so disturbing and weird and queasy and creepy and toxic. Meirachai. From those things, God is really showing up for me. Hashem nirali. God is showing up through this. In other words, through these very things, there's a message here. There's an opportunity here. There's an invitation here. From these things that seem so distant, Hashem nirali. God is showing up for me. V'kol zayidei b'chinas chachma. But for this, one must have the chachma. Chachma is the divine intelligence. Hanikra achaisi k'mayshakasav mishlei emar lechachma achaisi at. In Mishlei, King Solomon says, speak to wisdom and say to wisdom, you are my sister. Emar lechachma achaisi at. Speak to wisdom and say, you're my sister. Now the word achais, in Hebrew comes from the word knotted. Ichui means when two things are connected. We have, for example, in Gemara something called Ichui Alexandri, an Alexandrian knot. In Egypt, in Alexandria, they had an incredible, powerful knot. It took a lot of skill to make that knot, and it connected things in an unbreakable way. So achais is a sister. It's when two, I'm not my sister, I'm my sister's brother. But nonetheless, the relationship between siblings is a very deep one, because it can't be undone. It's a genetic one. So essentially, it's one that is very, very deep. And that's the difference between a sibling relationship and a spouse relationship. A spouse relationship is much more active. They're living together in one house. It also has intense ups and downs. A sibling relationship is a very different type of relationship. It wasn't created by you, and it can't be undone by you. Some people love their sisters. Some people love their sisters more. But regardless, she's your sister. This is my brother. Why? We share the same parents. We share the same DNA. It's an essential connection. So Shlomo Melech said, and you can't undo it. I say, you're not my sister anymore. You are my sister. Unfortunately, we may not be getting along so well. I get along with my sisters very well. I don't mean me. But if you know my sisters, you know why. But the fact is, a sister is a sister. A brother is a brother. A spouse relationship in many ways is much more intense. It's a lebedik and freilich. It's created. It can also be, God forbid, it could be uncreated. It could be undone. Sometimes it's necessary to do that. Depends on the circumstances, of course. So Shlomo Melech says, Emor lechachma achaisi at. Speak to Chachma and say, you are my sister. I always want to remain connected to you. Always. Because a sister is 24/7. I may be in another country, we may not be speaking, we may have not spoken for a long time, still your sister. If you don't speak to your spouse for a long time, it's not going to work. I can't just tell my wife, oh, hello, I'm back home after 3 months, let's continue the conversation where it was. It doesn't work that way. There's a constant relationship. With a sibling, sometimes siblings don't meet. For whatever reason, not necessarily for negative reasons, just how life is. And they could continue the conversation where they were last time. It's a different type of relationship. So Emar Lechachma Choisi At is, there's a constancy that you're my sister. Emar Lechachma. So the Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl says, when you have that chachma, then meirachak, even things that seem distant, Hashem nearly, God is showing up through those things. Through those distancing realities, which can distance me, Hashem is actually nearly, I see him through those things, through the chachma. So it's interesting, Shlomo Melech uses the word achoisi at, emar lechachma achoisi at. Whenever the same expressions are used in the Tanakh, they're always connected. It's called Gzeir Shava. Where else do we have the words achoisi at? Right here. This is the first place. So this was in Mishlei. In Shirashirim it says, Kol doidi doifik pischili achoisi rayasi yoinasi samasi. Here it's achoisi at. These are the words of Avraham Avinu. He told Sarah, Imri, right? We just learned in the beginning. What did he say? Imri na, please say, achoisi at. Say these words, you're my sister. And then Shlomo Melech uses exactly the same words. What Avram told Sarah, I want you to tell Chachma. I want everybody to tell this to Chachma, to wisdom. What does all this mean? Because when Chachma is my sister, I can bring back every thought back to its source. So now come back to the pasuk. There's many thoughts in the heart of a person. Many thoughts. They don't stop. They're raging. They're all over the place and they're constant. But Vatzas Hashem, the counsel of Hashem will endure. What does this mean? It doesn't only mean you plan one thing, Hashem plans something else. It's actually a guide for life of how to deal with all your thoughts. Literally, it's just, plan whatever you want. God has his own plans, it's fine. Don't take yourself too seriously, which may also be good advice sometimes. Be open to change, right? They say two people fail in life. People who don't have a plan and people who stick to the plan, right? You got to have a plan and then you have to know how to say, you know what? 2.0, plan 0.20, we're upgrading the plan. To be flexible. But he said it's really a guide for how to deal with thoughts. Rabbi's machshavas belavish vatzas Hashem yisakim is a way of dealing with your thoughts. Ki harbe machshavas bayin ba'adam b'mayach adam b'chal yom. No kidding. Many thoughts come into people's brains every single day. 7, but those 7 can be branched off into who knows how many. V'shema taimar shabayin leval b'loischa. Now you might say they are so bothersome. They are such a bilbul. Levalbo means they are so confusing. They are so overwhelming. They flood my brain. They drive me crazy. That's what a person thinks. Lekach amar. Therefore he says, no, it's not true. Atzas Hashem shehi tokum min nefilasa. This is an atzas Hashem. This is a perspective. This was an eitzah. This was the advice, this was the scheme, the plan of Hashem, shehi sakam in nefilasa, that every thought should be risen, should rise up from its fall. Because through this thought will be refined and sublimated. Mashiach is waiting for us to reach this state of consciousness as said. So Rabbi's machshavas belavish. It's so hard, it's so overwhelming. Constantly this thought, that thought, and then the thoughts contradict each other. You know how these thoughts work. And then you start arguing with the thoughts. And then your thoughts are, you're arguing with me? I'll show you who's right. So they argue back. And you're like, this poor little brain, it's 2 pounds of jello or 3 pounds of jello. What it contains in it. And this is all in the last 5 seconds. Right? Just think what happened in your mind just during this class. You don't want to. Okay, don't think about it. So think about the fact that you're not going to think about it. So now, you're not going to think about it? I will teach you if you don't think about it. It's like everybody don't think about the pink elephant in the room. You're not allowed to think about the pink elephant. So it's like, you lose if you engage, you lose if you don't engage. It's so difficult with these rabbis machshavas belevish. So he says the first thing you have to know, it's only 7. You're dealing with 7 thoughts, no more. No human being has been created who's dealing with more than 7 thoughts. The 7 have a lot going on, but it's 7 thoughts. 7 thoughts. That's number 1. Number 2, you have to know each one of these thoughts that came in, it is Atzas Hashem, He Sakum. Because at first glance, the grammar here is difficult. Rabbis machshavos is plural. Right? Rabbis machshavos. There are many thoughts. Right? So it should say, Ve'etzos Hashem, Heim Yakumu. And the thoughts of God, they will endure. He says, V'atzas Hashem, He Sakum. It's always one. Because all the thoughts really come from a place of oneness. But they have fallen. And they have been fragmented and they have been broken. And we don't recognize the original source. And through Chachma, a person could take each thought. And the Atzas Hashem, the reason God allowed this thought to come into me is He Sakum, that the thought should succumb. Instead of being downcast and downtrodden and broken, it should be able to rise up, be resurrected and be realigned with its source through which it gets all of its healing. And he says this is the definition of what redemption is, what Geula means. Now here, he gives the illustration what happens with Avraham and Sarah. Now before we continue, we're holding at the last paragraph of the page, K'may Baal Shem Tov. Let's try to bring this down and illustrate it, although this can be manifested in so many different ways. Yeah. One second, you wanted to ask something. Oh, you were asking for her? Oh, okay, wow. You're very gracious, yeah? Yeah. Ooh, beautiful. Beautiful, beautiful, yeah. So when Avram goes to the Akedah, in Parshas Vayir, it says, Vayares hamakam meirachik. He saw the place from a distance. So that is very connected with this one. Ki meirachik Hashem nirali. He's seeing God from a distance. And from the distance, he could see it. And what the Maor Einayim, what Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl is explaining here is that sometimes God doesn't show up in close proximity. He shows up from a distance. What that means emotionally speaking is, sometimes I meet him in an expected place. It's like he's close by. But sometimes it seems like I'm experiencing something that is so distant from Hashem. In fact, you can't get more distant. It's further, further, further away. You can't even get further. So obviously now it means I'm disconnected. I'm far away. So that's what Yirmiyahu Navi says, no. You have to know sometimes it's meirachik Hashem nirali. It's in that distance and in those experiences that seem to be distancing me and expressing my distance, where I'm really being shown something with a very distinct and decisive purpose of elevating and sublimating and refining and healing these very thoughts, which all come from these 7 categories. So now let's for a few minutes, Be'ezer Hashem Yisbarach, try to illustrate this, at least on some level. And I know there's many different illustrations and many ways one can take this, but I just want to give an example so that, and then everybody can apply it to their life, Be'ezer Hashem, in their own way. And I just want to bring out something. I said before, Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl, he only allowed the teachings to be printed those that he didn't remember him saying. So it's interesting that somebody could say this whole Torah and not remember that they ever said it. Right? Because this seems like it's pretty built up and there's like a whole philosophy behind it, obviously. But that was exactly his point. That the fact that he didn't remember he said it meant it came and it flowed from a very, very deep space of consciousness from the source. And that's exactly his point, that every thought can be brought back to the source. So he speaks here about the fact that we all have 7 thoughts. We all have 7 thoughts. And he says, lo yoiser, right? He says, nobody, yeshiva mine machshavas ba'adam v'lo yoiser, to quote in the second paragraph. There's only 7 types of thoughts, which means every single thought I may experience during my day, during my week, my month, my year, my decade, my century, it's really can go back into 7. There's 7 categories. You know, Microsoft, you can have a category. In the category, you can have a subcategory. In the subcategory, you can have a sub. But it's basically 7 categories in your computer. So I have to always file it and say, okay, this is this category, this is this category. Now, of course, it's not always as organized as in a computer, and sometimes computers are not organized. And there's a lot of overlapping, and it can get very complicated and complex, especially that you're dealing with intense thoughts. And I'm not this objective scientist of looking at these thoughts and analyzing them, and you don't want to become that, because that can sometimes detach you in a different way. But the point of being is that in every thought there's an energy. There's something it's searching for. There's something it's worried about. There's a message it's saying. That message has to do with one of the 7 midos in the person. And that's his point. Each soul is comprised of these 7 midos that we focus on during Sfiras HaOmer, but it's really the building blocks of every soul. So when we speak about Chesed, Gvura, Tif'eres, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, Malchus, these are the emotional building blocks of the human soul, and they produce endless thoughts. But every thought could be traced back to one of these. Now the thoughts can be coming from a place of what we will call tikkun, a place of healing, of integration. In other words, they're in sync with their source. The source of everything is Einaid Mulvadai, the divine wisdom and intelligence and love, as he put it here, Tainug Kol HaTanugim, the bliss behind all bliss. All bliss that exists in the world, all love that exists in the world, all intelligence exists in the world comes from one source. And it flows. And as we say in davening from Tehillim, Kulam b'chachma asisa. Everything is a product of chachma. Everything is a channel of chachma. So every thought that comes from one of these emotions, it can be a thought of worry. Anybody relates to that? Worry, right? That was a joke. A thought of anxiety. A thought of being overwhelmed, a thought of, oh my gosh, OMG, however you translate it. Oh my gosh, oh my God, oh my Google. Oh my goulash. Whatever it is, but that OMG, it's a thought. It's a thought of calmness. So every thought, as he says, take the first category, chesed, it's thoughts that are all connected to attachment. So any thought connected to attachment is connected to that one category. There's so many different types of thoughts of attachment. So here we basically have 2 types. One that are in the zone, they're in the flow of the source. And one, he says, that they're broken, they're fragmented. They're misaligned. So in one, there's connection, there's healing already, there's oneness. The other one, the thought is broken. The thought went through a brokenness. Why? It fell. Nefila. When I experience it, it's hard, it's painful. Rabbi's Machshavas B'Levit, it says it's overwhelming. It drives me crazy. The mental chatter can drive everybody crazy. If you experience it, you know what I'm talking about. If not, tell me what you're taking. But people's mental chatter drives them mad. And it doesn't stop. You know, you could stop talking, you could stop doing, you can't stop thinking. It's very hard. You know, if you tell people, let's be silent for a few minutes and just be present and stop thinking about anything. It's one of the most difficult things in life to do. Because there will be a thought that will come in and try to hijack you. And that hijacking is a very, very intense experience. So this whole avodah requires a tremendous presence of mind to be able to elevate, to be able to see the thought for what it is, hold space for it, understand that it comes from a very, very divine and noble source. It went through a nefila, it went through a shvira, it fell. In the falling and the brokenness, you don't recognize the wholeness anymore, but now I have an opportunity to bring it back and to heal it. Va'atzas Hashem, the reason he sent this in was, he succumb, for me to be able to help it rise up. Yeah. Right. What does it look like? What does it practically mean?
Probably harder for women to do that than men. Women have more thoughts at the same time.
Interesting. You're saying it's harder for women because they have more thoughts at the same time. Their brains are like the World Wide Web. The waffles and the spaghetti thing, right? The waffles and the spaghetti, yeah. It's hard for women to do, it's also hard for men to do. Who it's harder for, I don't know. But it's hard for both to do. I'm not sure that there's a general verdict about that, but maybe it's harder for women. I don't know. I wouldn't know that. But it's hard for people to do. Because there's a lot of steps here, and it includes also understanding what I could do and what I can't do, as we will see. So let's try to, you ask, what does this mean practically? How do we illustrate this? I would say, in psychology and in healing, there's a lot of different modalities. And like each system that's invented by human being, ein tov b'loi ra ve'ein ra b'loi tov. There's always the good things, and then there's the imperfections, the flaws. It's just how it is. People are subjective, people are biased, people are limited. And therefore, so many modalities have very, very powerful gems and very, very powerful tools that are very, very helpful for people. Are they perfect all the time for all people? I don't know. You have to know every situation. But very often, you get language and tools from different modalities that can be very helpful to understand the timeless truths that the Torah articulates in terms of a person's avodah, of a person's work in life. So I'm going to use the model of IFS, which has become extremely popular in healing. It's called Internal Family Systems by Richard Schwartz, who I actually did an interview with. You can watch it, a very interesting interview. And I asked him how he came up with the system of IFS, which has become quite popular and has helped many people. And he told me that it wasn't his idea. But over years and years, 40 years, he's been seeing people and families and working with them, and it's really his patients taught it to him. So it was very interesting. He said, "There's nothing to do with me. The people over years and years, they taught it to me, and that's how I developed it." What I really appreciated about it is that there's very, very powerful ideas over there that are very much in sync with what we learn in Yiddishkeit, in Torah, in Kabbalah, in Chassidus, in Machshava. And that's why I'm using this model, because even though there's many, many other models, and every model has, as I said, its clumsiness, its flaws, and models have to be applied in different situations, and you have to also know the wounds that people are dealing with, and what's the way to get into their soul, etc. But just there's always certain ideas and models that can be very, very helpful, at least to understand it and illustrate it, and also to implement and execute. One of his main ideas in IFS is that there's a self that is always, always whole. The self cannot be destroyed or tainted or tarnished or diluted or compromised. The real self with a capital S. However, and that self, of course, remains. But what can often happen to that self is it goes into exile. And he uses that word exile, which was very meaningful to me, because throughout the entire literature of Kabbalah and Chassidus, that's the term that's used, galus. Galus is the term that's used. It's the Cheskel says, "Va'ani b'taycha goyla," I am in exile. So the Baal Tanya says the ani sometimes is b'taycha goyla. The ani, the I of a person, could be in exile. And what does it mean in exile? It means it's concealed, it's eclipsed. We don't have access to it. I don't have access to it. You don't have access to it. What happens? Why does that happen? Why does the self go into exile? The person may have experienced something in life, either one time, or it's a developmental thing, it happens over a while. It could be very dramatic, or it could be not dramatic, but in their own life it was dramatic, even if on the outside it doesn't look very dramatic. And that caused the inner self to go into hiding. So for example, if a person's inner self experienced terrible, terrible pain, terrible, terrible shame, for whatever reason, but these are very, very natural occurrences, that self that is in so much pain, it's very hard to live with that. So that self goes into hiding, and it stays there. And now that pain is also hidden, that pain is also repressed. So who's governing my personality? Who's governing? So we have different parts, because that's how God made us. We have different parts, just like we have two different souls. Every soul has so many different parts. We don't have a mono brain. We have many different brains, many different parts. And the different parts, each one of them, takes on different roles to protect the person. You'll have what's called managers, protectors, firefighters. The managers are the one who are making sure everything is manageable. So you stay safe, you're secure, you're fine. The firefighters, when there's a fire, like you're being triggered in a very deep place, they know how to put out the fire. So we don't expose what we don't have to expose. We don't open the safe and see what's behind the safe. The protectors are very powerful shields to protect you from access to what it doesn't feel you could have access to. And what can often happen is my entire personality is governed by my managers and my protectors and my firefighters, and my real, true, authentic self is hidden somewhere, and they take over the entire system, and they are now burdened with the pressure, and one of the biggest pressures is make sure that you don't have access to that real self, because that's going to be very, very dangerous. And sometimes I could live my whole life and I don't even know it. I do know that I have anxiety. I do know that there's something off. I do know there's a dissonance. I do know that there's a sadness or there's a disassociation, or I'm always chasing myself and it's nothing is ever good enough. There's like an inner bitterness or despondency. Why do I need distractions? I do know that I'm just not in a place of calm bliss. That I know. But why? We assume that's how everybody is. Everybody's just supposed to be miserable. And then I distract myself one way, you distract yourself another way. And really, this is one of the greatest tragedies of life. That we don't understand the truth, or we don't feel the truth, that the self is really unbelievably amazing and powerful. It's full of joy, it's full of bliss, it's full of calmness. It doesn't need anybody's right to do that. Why? Because it's a chelek elokah mimal. The self at its core is fully alive. And as we say about Hashem, oiz v'chadva b'mkoymai. There's confidence and there's joy in His space. So in the space where I'm in the flow of God, there's confidence and there's joy. In that space, you're full of love. You're full of clarity. You're also full of confidence. You're also inquisitive. You're caring. You're compassionate. You're creative. Because that self is actually a piece of the Creator. Of course you're creative. The word creative comes from Creator. The Creator is creative, right? You're also creative. You're creative in what you're supposed to be creative in. I mean, you don't have to create this whole universe like God. You don't have to be so creative. But everyone has their thing to create. Of course you're compassionate. Your chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, hod, yesod, malchus are really just a flow of His. It's a flow of Hashem's. So that's, in a healed personality, that's what it means. That all the parts of myself are part of the self that is an extension of the divine, which is Hashem's chachma, and it's channeled through my emotions, and it's channeled through my thoughts. That's the ideal. But it doesn't work always. It doesn't work that way. What happens? There's a brokenness, there's a shvira, there's a nefila. What does it mean there's a nefila? The real self went into hiding. For whatever reason, it went into hiding. One example may be a child who's so filled with love and so filled with light, grew up in a home where they were not noticed. Nobody could reciprocate that love. Nobody can reciprocate that type of affection. For whatever reason, intentional, maybe unintentional, the people themselves were out for lunch, nobody did it for them, they can't do it for others. So this child may feel that I'm so undeserving of love. Why? I'm talking about a 2-year-old, a 1-year-old, a 1-week-old, a 1-month-old, a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 4-year-old. I'm not talking about a 25-year-old. At that point, they're usually already, boom. The protectors have been in for a while. But that little child, they don't know the whole story. So they say, oh, I guess I'm not deserving of love. I'm not deserving of attention. I'm not deserving of attachment. Which means maybe I'm too much. Maybe I'm just too much. Maybe I'm such a burden. Maybe I'm too heavy. So that inner self that has this need for attachment, you go into hiding because you're just trouble. You're creating trouble and you're just going to create endless pain. You're just going to be a cause of pain for yourself and for everybody else. That real self is now in hiding. Instead, my managers and protectors now take over. So maybe I realize that if I'll do amazing in school, I'm going to get validation. Oh, so that may be a nice form of love. And that's where I go. Maybe if I'll become a people's pleaser, maybe if I'm going to be the perfect girl in the house, making sure that the house is always tidy and clean, that when my father comes home, God forbid he should scream because the house is perfect. I will take on the responsibility for my mother and my father. Whenever there's a crisis, I will right away come in and take care and nurture and everything. And now I become, and I know that my source of love and glory is that I take care of everybody else. Everybody else. And it sometimes works. It sometimes works. And when I get older, this is my whole personality. I know that something inside is empty. Everybody knows. But I don't know of anything else. And then we build a philosophy out of it, and then we sometimes get married and we become that person. And in our community, sometimes that becomes the greatest person in the world because you're here for the whole world. You just don't know who you are. Sometimes I become this amazing people's pleaser. Sometimes it's the opposite. I have this anger. Sometimes I have to become this lonely human being because I can't trust anybody. Sometimes I become such a harsh critic of myself. Maybe I was criticized. Maybe I felt that anything but perfection is bad. So I felt that my real self is terrible. And now my whole life I have to make sure that I don't make mistakes. So for me to make a mistake is a disaster. Because if I make a mistake and you're going to see that I'm not perfect, you're never going to look at me again. That's what I learned then. So now whenever I come into a room, there are 100 critics inside of me. Before you open mouth, make sure you're not stupid. Make sure you don't sound stupid. There's anxiety. What do I look like? What don't I look like? What are you going to think? 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 And we don't even realize this. This person now may be 50 years old, 60 years old, 80 years old, 40 years old, whatever it is. They're walking into a poor bar mitzvah. They're walking into shul. But there's such hyper-vigilance. And I get used to it because everybody wants to survive. But what really happened? What really happened is my inner core has been in hiding, and all these managers and protectors, they're trying actually to give me a good life. They're trying to keep me safe. All anxiety is your system saying there's danger, and if you are not hyper vigilant, you are going to be hurt. You're going to be hurt. Now I get married, I have children, I'm just reacting to triggers that trigger me based on my protectors. And I don't even often know how to examine them. So I have all these thoughts inside of me. And this is what Rabbi Nachum of Chornobyl is teaching. And he's saying, take a deep breath. Every thought is a trigger. It's here to be healed. It's here to be healed. Now, healing doesn't happen like this. Healing happens by asking, whoa, what did this thought just tell me? This thought just told me something. So for example, maybe a person, this maybe is very relatable to a lot of men, but probably also to women. A person has a crush on somebody. And there's this anxiety around it. And it's very intense. You could say, leave me alone, leave me alone. He says, no. Vatzas Hashem hisakom. There is a wounded love in your psyche. There is a love you're looking for. You think that person who's not connected to you, if they give you attention, you'll get the love that you need. It's such a lesson what you're looking for. If you could find what you're really looking for, you know what can happen here. You won't need this type of thought. This thought is camouflaging a deep yearning for attachment that you're searching for. It's not a bad thought. It's a camouflage thought. The thought is not telling you the whole story. The thought is broken. So the first thing is, don't be embarrassed. Don't run away. Don't shame it. Because by shaming it, you're reinforcing it. By shaming it, it'll never be able to be healed. It's showing up to be healed. What I'm saying is, get out of my life, you sick thought. Get me out of here. Well, no. I came to be healed. It's like a child crying and saying, Mommy, I need to go to the hospital. Maybe yeah, maybe not. But the first thing is pick up the child, give her a kiss, give him a kiss, look and say, let's look at the wound. It's very hard to do that with my thoughts because they're so overwhelming. The Rabbi's machshavas belavish. There's atzas Hashem hisakom. Each one of these thoughts is expressing something in my soul, one of my 7 midas. Each one of them is telling a story. Either it's telling the story of true love and connection, or it's telling the story of wounded love and connection. Either it's telling the story of true awe, or it's telling the story of wounded fear, wounded anxiety. Either it's telling the story of true beauty, or it's telling a story of wounded beauty. True ambition, wounded ambition. True ambition means God created me, I'm in the flow, I want to show up with the tools He gave me to give my light to the world. Wounded ambition is, I always have to catch my tail and impress the world and be perfect and finish deadlines that are completely alien to me just to say that I'm a good person. I'm a wounded person. I can never even show up. Just an example. I'm always chasing, always feeling guilty. I can't be present. It's always, people become workaholics. Why? Because they love their work? Because they hate themselves. I can't be with myself. If I work, I'm a chai, I have distractions. We have so many brilliant distractions just to take us away from what we're feeling. And the truth is, every single thought is this. How do you know if it's a healed thought or not? Tune in, you'll feel right away. If it's a thought that's expressing oneness, calmness, serenity, and you feel the bliss of the gift of life, that's a thought that's expressing your state of oneness. If it's a thought that speaks in the name of guilt, blame, shame, bitterness, loneliness, anger, broken, there's a negativity there. There's a detachment there. That thought is inviting itself. It's coming up and it's saying you come from a very, very profound source. But you have fallen. So now your detachment thoughts or fear thoughts are misplaced. They're chaotic. And they will attach themselves to whatever they can attach themselves in order to be able to gain that security that you need. So this is an invitation. Number one, not to be embarrassed. Number two, to be aware. And then to start asking, what is the need here? What is the yearning? What is the pain? And every machshava then can be healed. Now, here we have to have an important qualification. This says in Tanya. Sometimes, if the thought is overwhelming and intense, I can't deal with it at the time. I can hold space for it with compassion. I could know that it's broken and it can't govern my life, but I can't really go into it because I'm simply mentally not in a position where I can take it on because it's just very, very intense. I may have to surrender, ask God for compassion and help, hold space with a lot of compassion, and then do what's the right thing for my soul to do at the moment. Not always is the thought ready to be sublimated. Sometimes it's very, very intense and overwhelming. But even then, a person understands that this thought is an external shell that contains within it very profound sparks. Now let's see how this story, is it clear? You understand what I'm saying? Or it's a little, Is it a little more practical now? Now there's no exceptions to this. All thoughts can be traced back into 7 categories. Every one of those thoughts can be from a place of brokenness, meaning it's not anymore reflecting me and my source. It's using some of that energy and it's a distorted energy. It could be as simple of me binging. I have a thought, I already ate dinner, let me go eat again. What just happened? Why do I want to eat again? My body ate. What do you think it is? The answer is, there is a void here. There's some void. There may be a stress, there may be an anxiety, there may be a responsibility. And if I stuff my taste buds for 20 seconds, I'll feel good. And the depression will happen in 10 minutes. So I could watch it. I could see where this thought is going. This thought is coming from somewhere. This emotion is coming from somewhere. The thought is a reflection of an emotion. The emotion and the thoughts work together. So as a result of that, with every single machshava, a person is terrified. I'm overwhelmed, I'm anxious, I'm afraid. This thought is reflecting something. It's coming from somewhere. And the same is true with every other thought. If I feel the need, now I'm going to boast. Some people feel a need to boast. There's a wound over there. There's a wound. It comes from Tiferes. Person wants to appreciate the beauty of life. Life is beautiful. I want to appreciate my beauty. I want to appreciate the beauty in others. I want to appreciate the beauty of the world, which is all the beauty of God, Tiferes. The same is true with ambition. The same is true with Haidaya, Haid. Haid all has to do with gratitude and submission, surrender. Yisoid is bonding, relationships, intimacy. Malchus is leadership, confidence, governance. All these produce thoughts. So now we come to the story. Take a look at the last paragraph. Baal Shem Tov nishmase begins in Miriam al pasuk hine no yadati ki ishi yefas marat. Comes the Baal Shem Tov and says, Avraham tells Sarah, now I know you're beautiful. Really? Ki eich lo yira oisa ad achshav shu me'animna. Next side. Turn over the side. How did he not see Sarah till now? It's impossible. He went with her all over the place. They traveled the world together. They went through so much together. He never saw her. Now I know you're beautiful. So the Baal Shem Tov says something very, very profound. Avraham's marriage went through what we would call a crisis, kivayachal, relative to the level of Avraham and Sarah. What was the crisis? It was expressed in these words, now I know that you're beautiful. Something he knew happened in their marriage. Avram was a chariot, a conduit for Hashem. His thoughts were always linked with the source of thoughts, meaning God's intelligence, God's thoughts. His thoughts were linked with Hashem's thoughts. Mikol Makai Machshavtoi Haisatamid Shaloi B'Makam Ariyah Hagashmis Lo Hikir Ba'ad Achshav Rak Shahalach LeMitzrayim Nemar Sham Vayered Avra Mitzrayim Sheyara B'Madregosei Agduma V'Yischilu Lavei Etzloi Machshavais Mebchines Hashvira. Wow. Till that point, when he looked at Sarah, he saw Sarah's beauty. But what did he see in Sarah's beauty? He saw it as God's beauty. He saw it for its truth. Sarah was a reflection of Hashem's Tiferes. Because everything is a reflection of Hashem's beauty. So his relationship with Sarah was so powerful and so pure because it was infinite. Because it was really a reflection of divinity. Now he's going down to Mitzrayim. Baal Shem Tov says he's not only going down geographically. The energy of Egypt affected him. When you go into a place, you're sensitive to energy. So he said, suddenly I'm looking at you and I'm seeing something else. Suddenly he sees Sarah as an object. It's like an object of beauty instead of divine beauty. One of the deepest crises in relationships is when couples see the other person as someone I can use for my benefit. You're here for my existence. You know, I never really see you for who you are. I don't notice you. I notice me. And you're good because I could use you. Now it happens in so many different ways. Sometimes in very vulgar ways and sometimes in very subtle ways. And people are very sensitive to this. What does it really mean? What makes a person allows me to see somebody else? So the truth is, when I am fully in the flow of the source, you know, back to Rabbi Nachum said, don't print anything that I remember. When I'm in flow, when I'm in the zone, so then my heart is open. So then there's real love. It's not to use you, because I'm not separate. When I'm not separate, I don't have to use anybody. On the contrary, then you see the other person as an extension of the oneness, and that creates real oneness. Suddenly, Avraham Avinu says for the first time, he sees Sarah as a beautiful woman. And in Egypt, we know what that means. It means she's an object to be able to be used for Pharaoh. And Avraham says, there's something of these thoughts that are going into me. I don't see Sarah for who Sarah really is. I see Sarah for who I want her to be, or I think she should be. In a relationship, the most powerful moment in the relationship is when we could see truly, truly the other person, which only can happen if I could see myself in terms of a channel for God's love, and then I could really connect to the other person where they are and see them for who they are. Like we spoke last week, intimacy is into me see. So you have to see yourself in a deeper way to see the other person in a deeper way. But when a person is not in that place, now it's up for grabs. Suddenly Sarah's body is not anymore an extension of her soul and of God's soul, it's like a separate reality. And Avraham Avinu felt that this happened to him because of his own Yerida to Mitzrayim, and their relationship to intimacy and relationships affected him. Their thoughts affected his thoughts. Suddenly Sarah was not the same person. The pasuk says in Mishlei, a tzaddik falls down 7 times and stands up. Literally it means people make mistakes. Even tzaddikim, they fall and they get up. Everybody falls. The question is, do you get up? He says it's much deeper. Hatzadik yipol b'bchinas hasheva, shein sheva mine machshavas shenoflu memekara. A tzaddik falls down in all 7. Sheva yipol tzaddik. He sees all 7 types of thoughts that fell down from their source. Achaydei tzaddik v'kam umiyachid l'sharshon l'makar ha'machshava shenikra chachma b'chinas ha'choisi v'nechshav loy avdos ha'yidei ze yosef. But you know what he does? V'kam, he raises all these thoughts. What makes the tzaddik a tzaddik is not that he doesn't deal with crazy thoughts. He may deal with all these thoughts. Sheva. But every type of thought which comes one of the 7, v'kam, he brings them back to the source of machshava called Chachma, which is his sister. And then his avodas Hashem is much deeper than it was before. Because before that, he didn't deal with all these things. Now he elevates the whole world back to oneness. So it's a much deeper avodas Hashem. So these thoughts are actually opportunities. They're gifts of healing. They're gifts for rehabilitation. Lachein Amar. So Avraham Avinu tells Sarah, Hine no yadati ki nafalti mi madregasi. One of the most vulnerable things a husband can tell his wife. I have just been compromised. I have fallen from my level. My marriage with you is now suffering because I am not in the place where I was yesterday. I know I fell from my madrega. This is called a marriage. How do I know? I see how I'm looking at you. I'm not looking at you the same way as I saw you last week, I saw you last year. Hine no yadati, that means I'm not just geographically going down to Egypt, emotionally. I have been affected by Mitzrayim, which means Mitzrayim from the word Meitzar, constraints. I'm in a constrained place. I'm in a confined place. Mashen kin mikaidim. Before that, he was not like that. Again, before that, her Tiferes was an extension of divine Tiferes, which means, of course, first of all, she was more beautiful. Second of all, the beauty was part of divine beauty, which also meant that his relationship with her was purely divine. It was pure. There was no narcissism in it. There was no ego in it. There was no sorrow here for me to be able to use or exploit, God forbid. This means his relationship with Sarah was a relationship as both of them being in the flow, so their connection is also deep. Because if connection is based on ego, so it's how much I could use you, how much you could use me. So it's always quid pro quo. You score brownie points, I score brownie points, he scores brownie points, she scores brownie points. It's like ego to ego, ego to ego. With ego to ego, nobody wins. Real connection only comes, can we go away from the ego. But how do you go away from an ego? Everybody's busy protecting themselves. It can only happen when a person really knows that their true self is purely divine. It's not egotistic. I don't need my ego to protect me. My ego is a protector. My ego is protecting my emotions from feeling their true source, because in its own mind, that's what I need for protecting. So it's creating all these types of need to control or manipulate or exploit. In every marriage, whenever there's a need to control or manipulate or exploit, what does it mean? It means the person is looking for love, but it's so wounded. It's so wounded. The attachment is so wounded. When I'm terrified and overwhelmed and I'm scared, what does it mean? It means I'm feeling awe. There's a lot of awe in this world, but it's wounded. It's so wounded. There's no trust. So I'm just anxious. I'm having anxiety. I'm busy looking for compliments and validation and boasting. And could you give me a compliment? Please give me what is it? I'm looking for beauty. I'm looking for confidence, but it's so wounded. My ambitions are crazy. Just constant and never ending and never peace. Again, I'm looking for nitzachon. I want the danotzach. I want to win. I want to fulfill my mission, but it's so wounded. When I'm surrendering and just becoming a shmata and a people's pleaser, it's real humility, but I have such wounded humility. It's not dignified humility. The same is true with bonding that is dysfunctional, or leadership that is dysfunctional. So Sheva Yipol Tzaddik, the Tzaddik watches all 7 thoughts falling. They're really divine thoughts, they're divine experiences, but they have become burdened with responsibilities and messages that have wounded them. V'kam, he wants to unburden them. He wants to take the machshava and say, you know what, your job is not to protect the self. Your job is to help the self. So back to that harsh critic. You weren't born to be a harsh critic. You don't have to criticize me for everything I say and I do. You know what you were born for? You're actually very, very good at diligence. Diligence is a beautiful thing. Internal introspection is a beautiful thing. You know, you could look at things, you could say, maybe this I could do better, that I could do better. You became a harsh critic because you're frightened of feeling the pain of not being perfect. Nebach, I'm so sorry that's what you had to become. Instead of liberating yourself and just becoming a voice that can look at things, that could say, oh wow, yeah, I guess I made a mistake. I'll do that differently next week. Okay, fine. The harsh critic says, no. It's so anxious because it's terribly wounded. All my burdens, my anxiety, my hypervigilance is there. It has a beauty to it. It could look at things. It could see things. It can analyze things. But the hypervigilance is wounded. It's wounded. Instead of being discerning, maybe something is healthy, something is not healthy, something is toxic, something is not toxic. It wounds me. It doesn't let me be anywhere. Wherever I come, it has to give me 1,000 opinions of what I'm doing wrong. Leave me alone already. It's not going to leave me alone because it wants to be healed. And the same is true with every type of machshava. So the tzaddik, sheva yipoil, he sees the falling of all seven, v'kam, and he brings it back to the source. So now Avraham Avinu tells Sarah, our attachment has been wounded. I'm not the Avraham that I was yesterday. That's what happens. We went into a very poisonous place. There's a lot of germs here. I got affected. I'm vulnerable. That's what he's telling Sarah. How do I know? I see how I look at you. I'm looking at you, it's back to what we spoke about last time. Noach got drunk because he wanted to go back from Das into L'mayla min Hadas. Right? Adam and Chava before the Eitz Hadas. How did they look at each other? They looked at each other as channels of the divine. Of course he loved Chava and they weren't embarrassed. Suddenly there's self-consciousness. Now there's Sarah. Oh, so this is you. Now this is me. This is what I see you for. Suddenly I'm feeling a different energy here. I'm protecting myself. Now there's something you can give me. I can get from you. How do I get it? He was in a different place. This bothered Avraham Avinu, and he told Sarah, I'm having a challenge now. This is what he tells her. So what does he say? V'limeid lo das, the last paragraph. V'limeid lo das li notzel mizeh b'makam hazeh shel Mitzrayim. How do we save our marriage? Al yidei she'imrina achoisi at. So he tells Sarah, now tell me you're my sister. Tell them, imrina, please tell them you're my sister. Achoisi at. Pirush. Lecha is bebchines achoisi shehi achachma helyona kamer. Goes back to the pasuk, Emar lechachma achoisi at. You and I have been affected. I see you one way, you probably see me also that way. It works both ways. The husband and the wife towards the husband. Sometimes it's only one way, but sometimes it's both ways. Egypt affected me, it probably affected you. So we both now, you need to become my sister, I need to become your brother. Emar lechachma achoisi at. What's the sister? Can we hold on to chachma? What's chachma? God's intelligence. God's wisdom. Va'az hamachshavos shebemitzrayim sheba'oloi hu kedei lahaloisam l'sharshan. So all these thoughts that came in from Egypt are just to be elevated with chachma. So practically Avraham is experiencing this intense thoughts. It's all about love. It's all about attachment. It's all connected to Sarah's beauty. Really, what is it? It's asking him to elevate it, to sublimate it, to bring it back to the source in Hashem. Achoy siyat. Imrina, please say achoy siyat. What does it mean here, achoy siyat? Let's both hold on to that chachma. What does it mean to hold on to the chachma? Chachma is koyach ma. The koyach of what? Chachma is curiosity. Chachma is no ego. Chachma is the openness to a new idea. Chachma is an epiphany. What does that mean in a person's life? I'm having this intense emotion. Can I be curious? Can I not judge it? Can I not fall into it? The worst thing I can do is just follow the thought down a rabbit hole as though it's a deity. The thought is just giving me information so I could find out what my work is. When I connect to Chachma, to the divine intelligence, I'm opening myself up to see what's really the soul behind this thought. What is the nitzutz in this klipa? If we both can hold on to chachma, then the Egyptian experience of our relationship will cause us to have a much better marriage, a much deeper, because all these thoughts will now be elevated, they will be healed, and once these thoughts are healed, then the totality of our being is connected in a different way, because even these thoughts have been brought back. So the totality of the being, the whole reason these thoughts came in is for me to heal them. It's not a mistake. This is essentially the mission. None of these thoughts came to confuse them. They all came as part of Avodas Hashem. V'zeu, this is what he meant. V'choisa nafshi beglalech. My soul will live because of you, Sarah. Literally, it means my life will be spared because they won't kill me. But the Baal Shem Tov says it's much deeper than that. My soul will live. There'll be tchias hamesim from my soul because of you. My soul will live. Why will my soul live? Because each one of these thoughts is my opportunity for Avodas Hashem, for serving God the way I'm supposed to serve God. So therefore, through this interaction, through this relationship, my soul will be able to come to life, because I will fulfill my role, I will fulfill my purpose, I will fulfill my mission. So all this Yerida, this downfall that I experienced here in Egypt, is not in order to destroy me or to destroy us or to destroy our marriage. It's actually the other way around, to be able to work it through. And that's what he's saying here. In every person's life, there are so many different thoughts and anxieties that come in, especially in relationships, that can tear people apart. And it's very easy for it to tear people apart. Well, the first thing, Avraham and Sarah trusted each other, that they can talk about it. Not always can everybody talk about it. You have to know if you could talk about it. Maybe you need another person to talk about it with. That's already a very individual question. But what did he tell her? He didn't tell her, I'm not dealing with anything. I am dealing with something. And if we can go down to those places and work it through and see what the ultimate purpose is, then it's a much deeper Avodas Hashem. Then the relationship will be much, much more powerful, because we're working through those places where we become distant. It's easy to talk about those things where everybody is connected and one. But that's not where the real relationship happens. The real relationship happens is when I talk about those things that are actually tearing me away from you, that are causing me to drift away, that are causing me to separate. Because if I can find what I'm really searching there for, and we could be there for each other in those places, that's where that's where it happens. So now we can have perspective why this is the first story about the first couple. This is the first story about the first Jewish marriage, because maybe this is one of the most fundamental things in a relationship. The most fundamental things in a relationship is to embrace conflict as an opportunity rather than as a curse. And what I mean by that is not to embrace conflict, everybody should go home fighting and enjoy it. The opposite. Very often, we think that a good marriage means there's no conflict. But usually, if a couple if they only talk about things that they agree with, my assumption is that they're both lonely, because it means that the part that is different, that they don't agree with, they just keep in the closet, because they don't want to create fireworks. I understand. So sometimes it makes sense to do. But both of them are lonely. What extricates a husband and a wife from loneliness? Only when they talk about those things in which they, so to speak, differ, in which they disagree, in which they can potentially drift away from each other. And when they can hold space for that part and the other, that's when they go away from their loneliness. So people say, run from conflict. It's the opposite. Embrace conflict, but embrace it in a very deep way. Not embrace the beauty of conflict. Embrace the potential of what exists in conflict. In conflict, there's a potential to drift away. That's where you're lonely. That's where you don't feel the other person gets you. Are you just going to repress it and hide it forever? And then you'll just be a lonely person. We'll only talk about things that we both agree. So what about 90% of my personality? I'll share that with my boyfriend, my girlfriend, whatever it is. Here we're learning the opposite. Avraham comes to Sarah and says, these are the thoughts. This is what I'm struggling with. And now when they realize that really they're looking for closeness to each other, because they're looking for closeness to Hashem. Everybody is one. Everybody wants to be one. Go back to one. So now the relationship becomes much deeper. Now, of course, whatever you're going to try at home always has to be done in a very wise and sensitive, perceptive way. Depends on the situation, and depends on the circumstances, and depends where he is, and depends where the woman is, depends where the husband is. I just want to make that disclaimer, because sometimes people try things that they hear in the class, and it can turn into some complicated issues, because everybody has to be ready for this. This is serious emotional work. But the principle here is also in our own life, in our own relationship with Hashem. Never be embarrassed and freaked out by all these different types of complicated thoughts and instincts and emotions that come up, because all of them come from one of the seven. All of them come from one source. All of them ultimately are begging for sublimation and healing in the right way and in the right context. And then, as Avraham Avinu says, "V'choisa nafshi b'glalech," your soul comes back to even deeper life through it. Have a wonderful week.